Go ahead, Delma.
Great. So welcome to the Genetics Coffee Shop discussion. So my name is Delma Kennedy. I'm a sheep specialist with OMAFRA, and genetics is an area of sheep production that I've spent a lot of time with over my career. My job here today is to just facilitate this coffee shop meeting. Thank you for your interest. We didn't really expect this large of a response. And as a result, we don't really have enough time to let everybody introduce themselves because we're hoping to have some time for some discussion with everyone. So Tom's going to put up a few polling questions just so that we all know a little bit about who is here before we start the discussion.
Okay, first one should be on the screen now, Delma.
The organizer must close the poll to enable screen sharing. It says, I don't know, I don't see it, but maybe everyone else does.
Yep, so it's we almost have everyone that has participated. I'll close the poll now to show the results.
Right, and so you need to screen share, right?
Note that should.
Can everybody see? I can't see them, but if everyone else can, we're good. Do you want to tell us the results maybe?
So the results were 57% yes and 43% no for that question.
Okay.
And just going to bring up the next. So the next question should appear. Perfect. And the results for that were 80% yes and 20% no.
Perfect.
Next polling question should be up. And almost everyone has voted. So we have 68% yes and 32% no. And the last polling question should be up now. And for this polling question, we had 5% 1 year or less, 23% 2 to 5 years, 14% are 6 to 10 years, and 59% over 10 years.
Great, thank you, Tom. So just before we start, I want to also introduce Gord Vandervoort. He's on the picture there on the right. He's a geneticist with Ag Sites and had sheep on his farm for quite a few years, but he's also been close to the sheep genetic evaluation system pretty well since it came into existence and has often helped out with the system. So in order to speak to the group, we're not able to mute and unmute ourselves very well. So Tom will need to unmute you when it's your turn. So in the box on, should be the right-hand side of your screen, I think, there's a spot to type a message. So if you type a message that you'd like to speak, then Tom will unmute each one in turn. And if you'd prefer to type in a question or a comment, he can read it out as well if you don't want to try and speak, or if we have any trouble with the audio. So now with that, I'd also like to introduce Keith Todd, for those of you who don't know him already. Keith has tremendous experience in the sheep industry. He's worked in the feed industry as well as managing meat and dairy sheep flocks. He has a passion for sheep breeding stock and performance testing, and is part of a family sheep enterprise which has had sheep since the 1940s. So we're really fortunate today to have Keith with us to chat about why record keeping and performance testing is essential to his operation. And hopefully we can have a good discussion with all of you as well as to, you know, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and how we all can work together to have a better system. So Keith.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. So thanks, Delma. Thanks, Tom, for organizing. Just a bit of information for everybody. So I'm new to the board of directors for Ontario Sheep Farmers and part of the genetics and genovis committee. And this came up as an idea to try and reach out to producers because of obviously no in-person meetings over the last year, where it was the plan was to have a bunch more in-person meetings over the last year, apparently, for genetics information and growth, I guess, of education for everybody. So the plan is, if this goes over well, and it seems like we have quite a bit of interest, we're hoping to do more webinars like this, maybe with different topics along the way. And this one was to be more of an introductory to people and to get some information on maybe how to get more people doing performance testing and ultimately enrolling in genovis to try and move our Ontario flock forward, but also the national flock too. The more data we can gather, the better it will be for the industry as a whole. So saying that, I guess the two performance data sheets that you can see that I printed off and sent to Delma are two individual rams that were born in the last year on the Ile de France breed, which have, if you look at the top line on the performance data, very similar statistics across the top. If you can see it, it might be a little fuzzy on your screen if you can enlarge it. But you know, both rams I think were very good performing rams. But if you dissect the data and using from the genovis program and using the different genetics, because both rams are out of different sires and different dams genetically as well. But the overall performance data, the raw data, is very similar. And then we also do loin scanning, which gives us another piece of information, I guess, when you're assessing animals. So, but look at the two rams that we have here. One obviously has a lot higher index than the other one, and when you're making selection on which ram you might want to use. So I guess I use these as genovis as a tool for our operation when we're selecting out our top end animals that we want to maybe do some embryo work with, or AI those animals. Those would be the top end animals that we use for selection, and then we also use our genovis data for weeding out our bottom end animals to cull and using them if they're not, you know, the ewes aren't up to snuff as far as their weaning weights and information there. So if people have any questions, feel free to ask, type in your question or get the question through, things we can touch on. What else do you want to touch on here, Delma? Is there, do you have any questions directly to me that we should answer?
Sure. So who do you think needs to keep performance records?
Well, performance records, I think if you are experienced or want to be in the sheep industry for any amount of time, I think performance records are essential just to know where you are from year to year and whether you're making progress on, you know, I guess the biggest one even to start at is just weighing your lambs at weaning if you're not intending to go all the way and sign up for genovis, but and doing 50 and 100-day weights, and but even just, you know, weighing your lambs at weaning would certainly give you some guidance and whether any changes you made on your operation is going to improve, whether you've made the right changes, I guess, and even in your ram selection is improving your performance. Would be a good start, I guess, in my opinion. So.
Great. And I guess one of the things too we wanted to ask the participants is, you know, if you're not already involved in performance testing, why not? You know, what are the barriers to that? Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make? One of the things in the polling questions is we had 80% saying that yes, they're you know, they're keeping performance records, and only 68% are buying performance tested rams. So that's another thing is, you know, why is that? Does anybody want to weigh in as to some of the issues?
We've got two questions that have come in, Delma. One is, what performance records would you suggest for pasture-based operations? Not sure who will want to take that one.
Okay.
Can you say it one more time?
Yep. What performance records would you suggest for pasture-based operations was the first question.
Okay. Do you want to have a go at that, Keith, or?
Sure. I guess doing them at weaning time would be, I know you talk to guys in Australia and New Zealand, doing their weaning weights when they're pulling their lambs off the ewes is the big step for them. Now they have extended for their lamb plan and sill programs, their weaning weights are at a higher number than we have at 50 days. So, but weaning weights would certainly be, I would recommend, the biggest thing. And in recording your sire information and seeing if you're getting an impact from if you've put in new rams, that would be, to me, that's probably for pasture, that's a big thing in my opinion. Do you think so, Delma?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. You know, you need some way of evaluating how those ewes are doing and comparing the ewes to each other, and how, you know, your ram choices are working or not working.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the same, that at weaning you want to get some weaning weights on lambs, and ideally you'd also be able to figure out who's raised their lambs.
Yeah.
So knowing what lambs belong to what ewes.
Yeah, and even at that point in time, body condition scoring the ewes would be valuable, I think, at doing that as well, and seeing how the ewes are holding up in the pasture conditions that you've got. And I guess my opinion always has been, if you have ewes that are either at both ends, either the really thin ones, if you know, or the really fat ones, you know, take your extremes and see why is there a reason? Is the ewe raising triplets on grass, or is there a fat ewe that's at the end that she's lost all her lambs? Just making a better assessment there to, you know, to find out why those ewes are at either end of the extreme, to try and make more consistent ewe flock moving forward, and I see that as a real valuable tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing they're doing, sort of Australia, New Zealand, is they're selecting animals on body condition score as well, so that those animals that are raising 2 or 3 lambs and able to maintain their body condition score, they're trying to select for those animals as well, as a feed efficiency kind of thing. And
I know when I spent some time there and speaking to somebody that does loin ultrasound scanning, they were actually selecting lambs coming off of grass, selecting them for higher fat levels, because they were finding that they were selecting for lean. The ewes were having a hard time maintaining body condition over time, and they were actually selecting for more fat. Now, obviously, totally different way of raising sheep than what a lot of people here do, but in those harsher conditions, they were selecting for lambs that would carry more fat along with larger loin muscles. So they weren't afraid to select for animals with more fat. And then in turn that's where they're getting more marbling and getting higher eating quality values. That's the step they were using. But they were also using that genomics factor in there and doing a lot of blood testing on top end animals. So.
We have another question from Jen Nash, but I'm going to unmute you, Jen, and let you try asking if that works. And you should just be able to unmute yourself to ask your question. Doesn't appear to be working. The question was, Keith, can you explain loin scanning and a little bit more information on that?
Yep. So right when we do our 100-day weighing, we have Chris Crump from the Strathroy area comes up and does our loin scanning for us. And he has a specific a probe, I guess, that's certified by Genovis and to scan the loins and also measure the back fat and two different back fat measurements, and then the loin, and then the information we input it into the Genovis program when we send in our weights, and then that's when we get back the information from Genovis on the EPDs, on the indexes. And obviously you get a lot of, you see consistencies from certain sires, and you know, I know from different breeds, you'll have certain rams that'll be a little bit more performance oriented, a little bit more frame, but not quite as much muscle. And then you have other rams that maybe have, you know, are more muscular, larger loin, or they're more maternal. So, you know, within a breed, you soon learn that there's different bloodlines and different genetics of a different purpose, even within the breed. And using those different pieces of the puzzle to try and ultimately come up with, you know, an ideal animal for that breed. So we just use the loin scanning as a tool. And obviously when if we're selecting rams, if the information is available to us, then we try and pick rams that have above average loin eye area. And I'm not so worried about the fat as much, because my personal opinion is it's more affected by environment. But you will see if there's trends, if you see one animal that's a lot on the leaner side or one on the fatter side in your group, then it sticks out and we pay attention to that. But generally I'm not selecting much on fat of the animals. So.
Okay, and we have Kimberly, who is unmuted, who has a question. Keith?
Okay.
Go ahead, Kimberly.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm on Genovis. I use it, but minimally, just because I'm not a techie. Get to learn how to use the program better. Like, is there any way of getting help? I know Emily's pretty good, but sometimes the language is an issue.
Yeah, the language barrier is there. And I think that was one of the goals, I guess, if we were to have in person, was to get somebody to come from Genovis to do that, to work on that. And I think I'd have to talk to Emily again, but I think they have done some, maybe Delmy, you know this, have they done some webinars on how to use it, or would that be something that you to, you know, learn how to use it more efficiently?
Yeah, they will do webinars on how to use it as well.
Okay.
And I guess one of the questions, and you can fill it out in the wrap up too. We're going to have a little wrap up survey, is what exactly you're looking for. I mean, we do have lots of resources here for, you know, how to use genetic evaluations rather than how to use the program itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just depends, what exactly you're looking for. How do you log in, or how do you get reports, or how do you use it on the farm, or maybe
Yeah,
all of those things.
yeah, I'm past the logging in and entering data stage, but like just using the reports and understanding the reports. And then just while I'm here, and Keith, you can probably answer this question. If I have bought a ram that wasn't on Genovis, I'm basically starting from scratch, right, with his performance?
Not necessarily. If there's other linkages to those genetics,
Okay.
that will certainly help with
Okay.
your index. Because I know when we purchased semen and used semen that is not, there's no record of a total outcross to Canada. So
Right.
you will, sometimes it is frustrating. You will see them a little bit lower than what you'd hoped, but I've found that over time, for example, the one ram we brought in from Suffolk ram we brought in from Australia, the first crop of lambs we had, they were just average for genovis indexes.
Okay.
But then even using his offspring, and now the daughters are starting to come into production, you're seeing those numbers are really starting to climb.
Okay.
And in that kind of a case, my feeling is you gotta trust your instincts and your gut on if you're buying out cross genetics.
Okay.
And use all the data that you have available to you when you're purchasing, even if they're not on Genovis.
Right.
And try and make a good an assessment on that animal as best you can.
Okay.
But again, it's a tool. So, and I think if we make it more than a tool, if you're selecting just solely based on your genetic indexes, you're going to run into problems down the road. We've seen it in other species, like the Angus business. Some of the people have done that, and they've run into issues. So use it as a tool, is what it's meant to be, and try and use the information, as much information as you can. Yeah, I guess that would be, because I've run into the same thing, and I think if we get more producers enrolled in Genovis across the country, then everybody's going to be able to make smarter decisions when it comes to breeding. So I think that's part of the reason for this, is to try and find out if anybody has any reasons why they haven't enrolled, or what is the limiting factor why people haven't enrolled. Because really, we only have, I think it's in Ontario, there's only just under 40 producers that are actually enrolled in Genovis. So if anybody can share some light on that, why maybe they haven't, or they know why people haven't enrolled, would be beneficial to the group for sure.
Okay, we're going to try and take a question from Josh while he gets his microphone set up. We do have Josh, go ahead with your question.
It was more of a comment. It was just we participate in Genovis here at our place, but due to population size and some of the breeds, it's hard to find other breeders that are participating in it as well. So a lot of times you find yourself in a position where you have no choice but to buy untested rams.
Yeah, and no, I agree. It is tough sometimes to find animals that are tested that meet your criteria, I guess, or the direction you want to take your sheep flock in. So why do you think there's less? Why do you think there's not as many people enrolled in Genovis? The cost isn't very expensive. I think with the subsidizing from CPOC and CSBA and OSF, our annual cost now is like $260. So why are people not signing up, do you think?
I think a lot of people are just afraid to be the one that's going to be in the bottom 20%.
Okay.
So in terms of next question, I have sent a request through Romy. If you wanted to ask your question, should just be able to unmute your mic. Okay, and Sheila, go ahead.
Okay, am I unmuted or muted?
You are unmuted, Sheila.
Okay, thank you. Yes, somebody earlier was asking about understanding the genovis records. I've been doing this for more than 14 years, and what I have discovered is the easiest way for me to analyze quickly so I can translate my performance to potential clients is I have Amelia at Genovis. Once everything is in and printed off and I get my first what I call contact lamb report, I then ask her to take every animal, divide them by sex, meaning males first, ewe lambs second, and run them from the best to the worst for both male and female. That way, at a quick glance, I am able to look at a sheet and see how many I have in the 90% or the 80%. And then I'm able to cross-reference over and look and see who the sire and the dam is, what their average daily gain is. And by knowing their average daily gain and the spread between the two, because I am a producer that brings everything in from outside, I can quickly calculate, literally to the penny, what it's going to cost me to bring that lamb up to 100-pound weight. I'm also able to look and see, using strictly the percentage figures, where they fit from a genetic point of view, all on one quick sheet, so that when somebody is looking at wanting to purchase quality stock, everything in my flock is also health certified with the highest standards we offer in Ontario, but they are able to look and see quickly which rams they would like based on the performance numbers. And the same thing for their ewe lamb selection.
Perfect. Thank you, Sheila. Any comments there, Delma or Keith?
I do. I know. Thanks for your comments. I know you can go in and do that sorting feature right in the program on your desktop or laptop with the Genovis program. And a lot of those tools now are available. Instead of having to talk to Emily, you can do it yourself if you wish to do a lot of those sorting features now. So it's been, I think they've improved the program, and it's quite a bit more user friendly than it once was to make those choices.
Okay, and Romy, I know you had a question. Are you able to unmute? I don't see any in there. Let me just check the chat feature here to see if there's any other questions. Quite a few. When the market is this short of lambs and there is currently no grading system or pay incentive, why loin scan? And another question was just where can we get more information on loin scanning?
Why loin scanning? I think for the they've also done some genetic linkages, and Delma, you probably can answer this question, but as far as production for selecting animals with larger loin eyes, and I think for long-term success of the industry, and you obviously want to produce lambs that have more muscle and less, more larger loin eyes. We hear constantly from processors that our lamb is, when you get into the restaurant and grocery store side of things, that the lamb is very inconsistent. So the more that we can, in my opinion, and for the greater good of the industry, we have to look at selecting animals that have that larger loin eye muscle, because obviously the racks in your loins or your are your most expensive cuts of meat. So the more we can continue to improve on providing lambs with larger loins and larger racks, it's going to be better for the industry as a whole in the end, in my opinion. So that's the way I look at it. And it doesn't, getting that piece of information doesn't cost a lot of extra money. I just find it as a valuable tool.
Okay, another question here. What number one EPD and ETC number are you using, or should we use to pick our top and bottom ewes?
Say that again, Tom. What EPD number?
Yeah, what number one EPD/ETC number are you using, or should we use to pick our top and bottom ewes?
Let me think about this. With the terminal breeds, I believe you can look at your MAT HP numbers, and then for the prolific breeds, I believe, the high prolificity numbers you use for your prolific breeds, and then if you want to increase your lamb numbers. But I look at quite often, I'll look at the total weight weaned on my ewes to pull out my bottom ones. If there's something that's not performing, if she's not weaning enough lambs, or not weaning enough weight of lambs, those are the ones that I'll pull off the bottom. So that's generally how I work, but I do like the maternal numbers I've found on genovis. It helps me to identify, especially when we're starting to look at doing genetic improvement and doing AI and that sort of thing. I'll use those numbers to help pull out my ewes that have just demonstrated that they have higher genetic merit on the maternal side, and hopefully that way you're going to have higher conception rates as well if you have more consistent maternal numbers. So that's how I've used it as a tool.
Another question here that came in over the chat. Once you are enrolled in Genovis, do you have to participate in every category? For example, can I put in my weights but not do loin scanning?
Yes, you don't have to do loin scanning. It's just another option. There's very few people in Ontario that do loin scanning. I think there's 2 technicians, I believe, that are certified, one in Western Ontario, one in Eastern Ontario right now. And I know Quebec has, I think, 4. And it's more readily available there. But and there are a couple technicians in Western Canada that do loin scanning. But no, it's not compulsory to sign up.
And the other question is, what does it cost to enroll, and is there a minimum flock size?
Actually, I just paid my enrollment fee for this year, and it was, I think, $260 and change, plus HST, of course. So it's relatively affordable. It's subsidized by CPOC, Canadian Sheep Breeders Association, and Ontario Sheep Farmers each put money in towards that to bring our costs down. And what was the other part, Tom?
I'm just going back here. It was about costs for the program.
There's no
minimum flock size. Yeah, there is no minimum flock size. I know a producer that has, there's people with 20 ewes that are on it, but they see the value. They produce purebred stock, and they see the value in obtaining those numbers, and for betterment of their flock and betterment of the breed. So yeah, there's no minimum flock size.
Perfect. And I'm just making sure that I'm getting all of the questions. We have Colleen who had a question. I don't know, Colleen, if you're able to ask. And I'm just going to scroll here. If there's any other questions. I'm not seeing any that haven't been asked or asked in one fashion or another. I'm just going to check the other window here to see if anything else came through. No, I believe that concludes our questions, unless anyone wants to just message over the chat, and we can unmute you or ask your question. Let me just see here. There was a question if Gord wanted to talk about multi-sires.
Okay, yes, the way in which the system handles multi-sire now is based on the breed composition of the multi-sire group. So they try to tie all the animals back to the, based on the breed origin of the animal. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. I'll let you know if something else comes through.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just add a little bit more in case they weren't talking about crossbreeding, but they were talking about group breeding.
Yeah.
In the case of group breeding, there's sort of basically the genetics aren't actually attributed to the sire at this point, because there's no way of knowing which genetics were in the group per se. But in the future, if enough people wanted it, like at one time we did record groups of rams so that if you had a group breeding, you could designate the group being, these 4 rams or these 3 rams. And some other systems do that and try and attribute the genetics back to the appropriate groups.
It's the way in which the system now, for those animals, it's called a phantom parent is assigned to the animal. So it will basically, the system will take account of then, so the average for males in the system for that year and that breeding season, that would be the adjustment that would be made to that lamb's EPD.
Yeah. So I guess the simple thing is that you don't have to have single sire matings. Your genetic evaluations won't be quite as accurate, but you can still get reasonable value from it and get good indications on differences in progeny. So for example, if you always did group mating, but you bought a new ram this year, you can still get an indication of how the lambs this year did compared to last year genetically, which gives you an idea of, is that new ram doing what I want or not?
And one last question that was not asked, backing up a little bit, any steps to use the actual ram averages of that multi-group?
Sorry, Tom, could you say that again?
Yeah, it was, sorry, one just came through. Any steps to use the actual ram averages of that multi-group?
Indirectly, it would be, yes.
Yeah, so right now we're not recording the groups.
No.
So until we record the groups, we can't actually record differences in the RAM groups. Like when Gord says indirectly, it happens indirectly because of the management group and the year differences.
Yeah.
But we'd need to start recording which rams are in which groups to do it well.
And Jen has a question. She's unmuted. Go ahead, Jen.
Yes, I was just wondering if Genovis actually tackles the day-to-day, occurrences in your flock, like, when you're drenching or when you're vaccinating. Does it handle that? And if not, which piece of software would be running alongside of that?
Thanks, Jen.
So Genovis just basically is set up to handle the genetic evaluation end, so it doesn't sort of tackle those management tasks. But there are a few potential softwares that try and integrate the two. So Ag Sites with BioTrack and the Go 360 is one of them. Also, UBite and also UManage all have systems that will produce files that go to Genovis and bring the evaluation files back and put them in their management software so that you can do, the management things on the farm as well as get the genetic evaluations to go with it.
Okay, another question that just came through. How does the new rolling genetics update that Genovis is employing affect records? The question was about the new rolling genetics update that
Okay.
Genovis is employing, and how does that affect records?
So this will be the move back to a rolling base instead of a fixed base. And so we've had a rolling base before. Only some of you will remember it, I guess. So what this is it's all about what is average. So with EPDs or evaluations, to get your index or your average number, you need to compare it to something. So when the base is rolling, it means that average changes on a regular basis. So usually a rolling average will roll each year, and I can't remember what the time frame is now, but it'll be a 5 or 10 year span, and so the average will be based on the previous 5-year average, and then it'll roll each year. So there's good and bad to both, right? You can't have everything, unfortunately. So if you have a fixed base, and in a fixed base, it means that average never changes, then over time, average isn't 0 or average isn't, positive instead of negative or whatever number you've chosen. The average will go up, and eventually all of the animals will become positive instead of some being positive and some being negative. And so people like it when they can say that, if 0 is your average, that animals above 0 are above average, and animals that are negative are below average for the breed. And so with a fixed base, you can't do that. But the advantage of the fixed base is you can see your genetic change, right? So if the average for your flock is, +1, and it goes up to +1.1, then you've made that progress. So that's a fixed base. So on the rolling base, the difference is you always, if you decide 0 is average and plus is, above average and negative is below average, then that's always maintained. So you always know that. So if you go to buy an animal or see an animal somewhere, it's very simple. You can say, positive is above average, negative is below. But on the farm, when you're using it, you can't see the genetic change. So if the average for my flock is 1, and it goes up to 1.1, I don't know if I've gained that 0.1 or whether the average has changed. And so then you have to go back and figure out what the genetic change has been, because if, for example, if I'm 1 and I stay at 1, I might think I didn't make any genetic change, and I could have made genetic change. I just made the same genetic change as everyone else. So I can't see my genetic change. So when you have a fixed base or a rolling base, you're always choosing between those two things, whether you can see the progress on the farm or whether it's easy to see where you are in the population or where an animal is in the population. And so going to the rolling base, that's what you're going to see. Is it's going to be harder to see the flock genetic change, but easy to tell whether an animal is above average or not. So hopefully that I didn't confuse the issue more than it already was.
And another question, or maybe something to clarify that came up earlier, was a comment about being in the bottom 20%. I wonder if we should maybe address data and whether that's public or who sees it, in terms of the comment earlier made.
So I guess as far as being published on a website or anything like that, I believe that it's still like the information has to be above average to be published. But I understand, I understand the pain. Like this has been an ongoing issue for a long time is the marketing side of things. And I'm not sure how we overcome it, right? Is even if someone's not on the program and they don't have any numbers, our brains are set up to assume that that's got to be better than when we see numbers that we know are below average. So I know this animal's below average, so I'm better off taking a chance on this animal that has no records because maybe it's above average. And so it's a problem. It's a marketing problem. And, in my mind, the bottom 20% of the animals should still be better than someone who's not doing performance recording and selection, right? They should be better than those, even the bottom 20%. But, we have a habit of saying, you should always choose the top, the top 10% or whatever in the population. It's just when our tested population is so small, that's maybe not always the case, right? If you're depending on what population you have at home. So yeah, I don't know how we overcome that. It's a really big problem. Because yes, it's a hard thing to answer, right? Is that if you can sell all your breeding stock now, why put numbers on it and not be able to? Because now, there's proof that they're below some of the other animals that are out there. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that one.
Yeah, I will, Donald. A couple things, I guess. Putting numbers to my animals, because obviously when we started, we weren't sure where they were going to go either. Dad had done the ROP years ago, but once I started on Genovis, which I'm not sure how long ago that was now, probably 10 years ago or more. Our Southdown breed, the Southdowns that we had, of course, because they're a minor breed, they were lumped in with other minor breeds, and the indexes on the Southdowns coming back compared to those other sheep, were quite low. But over the last 10 years now, we've made in some of our selection and better rams. And some of that's been, I guess, too, because we have a hard time finding Southdown. Well, there is no other Southdowns that are performance tested. So, but we've been able to make changes now that our indexes are in the 90s on the Southdowns, and comparing to the other minor breeds as far as for performance and carcass traits. So, we've been able to make changes, and whether to the database, there's more information too on the Southdowns going into the database, which helps as well. But even using animals that are below, we have some ewes that, wouldn't be quite average as far as performance, but the maternal numbers are still pretty good. But those sometimes may end up being, you have animals that the ewe's got good udder, she milks really well, her gain index might not be as high, but those are the type of ewes that, they milk well and you breed them the right way to the right ram to complement what traits she has. That's where you're going to get some of your best breeding animals. So again, it's just another piece. But if an animal is structurally correct and put together well, she milks well, good temperament, there's a lot of other things. If her index isn't very high for gain, but she has a lot of other things going for her, it's just another, the way I look at it, it's another breeding piece. And the way I look at it, you got genetic diversity is not a bad thing to have in a flock.
Yeah.
So because breeding it's a puzzle, and you never it's always a constant change, and the more information you get, you can make adjustments as you go. So.
And I don't see any other questions at the current moment in the question box, Delma and Keith.
I just had a couple comments that were sent to me here, Tom.
Yeah.
One was a comment made about in the past maybe genovis hasn't been uptake quite as well because there hasn't been as many education meetings in Ontario, especially I guess compared to Quebec, where it's a little bit more in the forefront. And I think that's true, and hopefully we can keep getting improving the education, and so people see it as a valuable tool. And then there was another comment that some people maybe don't performance test, and we've touched on this, is because they're afraid that their flock might not test quite well. So.
Yeah, and there was another comment about top performers are published, but they have to give their permission to post, and I think that goes back to the concern about those in the bottom 20%.
Yeah, and I know we've had there's been producers that have talked to because of the French language barrier, and I've sold some sheep into Quebec. They've called and asked for permission to actually, if people can go into our genovis records and just to check out our genetics and check out our indexes and how it might fit into their flocks. So they call and ask first if people would like to do that. So, and I've never had a problem with that. And if people want to take a look at them, they're more than welcome to. So that's the Emily and the staff at Genovis are very good that way, and confidentiality and working with people, and any questions you might have, I've always found them very, very friendly and easy to work with. So.
Perfect. I don't know, Delma, if you have anything else before closing out, because I think we have reached all of the questions from the participants.
I don't think so, really, other than we are committed to trying to talk more about genetics over the next year or so, and hopefully we can start to meet some of these needs that people are bringing up. And please fill out the questions that we send, because we will use them to try and put on some more events or give some opportunities for discussion. Because I think another thing we're really missing is having a place to talk about genetics on a regular basis here in Ontario. Just a forum for people to, share how things are going and how they're using it and things like that. And once we get back to being able to do in-person things, I think we can do a better job at creating that. We were talking about having, some sort of an annual workshop or get together to do that sort of thing. But any ideas you have on, how well this worked, or other things we can do online in the meantime, are definitely welcome.
Perfect. Thank you, Delma. Well, thank you, Keith, Delma, and Gord for leading today's discussion, and thank you to everyone who took part. As Delma mentioned, a survey will be circulated later this afternoon to everyone who's participated in the call. We hope that you take a few moments to fill that out, because your feedback is valued and appreciated. And wish everyone to enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and take care and stay safe. And thank you for joining us.
Keith.